Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. Thank you for joining us wherever you are. I'm Santeri. I will be working as the host today, and we have a great lineup of speakers and informative content for you. We'll kick off with opening words from our CEO, Maria Mendiluce, after which I'll give you a whistle-stop tour of what our guidance document looks like. Then we'll have a brilliant panel in store for you with great speakers. And lastly, we will finish off with Q&A. So you can submit your questions through the Q&A and we'll take those at the end of the call. Over to you, Maria.
With you, yes. And to talk about this super fascinating topic, and I really want to extend my thanks to the panelists for both being today here, but also for the work in supporting this work, as well as the many companies that have been helping us come up with this business action checklist, of which we are launching today. I don't think I need to tell you about the risks of climate change. No, I think we have a mature group in the audience. I don't think I need to tell you something that is quite obvious, that clean energy, renewable storage is becoming so competitive that business only want to do that, and doing something else will not be very good for their business value. And so the rationale behind fossil to clean continues to be quite important. And the team has been developing a set of actions and examples that can help and guide companies in the transition from fossil to clean. This set of actions are sector agnostic, but they are aimed at supporting companies as they move from fossil fuel generation and use to renewable energy. The benefits of this transition are very clear to companies, both in terms of the market value that they bring, the reputational benefits, reducing regulatory risk, and being much more resilient to volatile fossil fuel prices. I would add as well that, given that climate change is a problem that affects us all, also the companies here have not only an interest of benefiting from the transition, economically benefiting, but also the fact that the more companies that move to renewables, the better, because it will provide a very strong demand signal that will drive for more innovation, price reduction, and alternatives. It will reduce overall emissions for those companies, but given that all of you are connected to one another through Scope 3 emissions, it will also reduce your Scope 3 emissions, and it will reduce the impact that climate change will have in all of us. So that's why I think many of you are here today and listening, because of that. And so I just don't have much to say. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. So I'll pass over to you, Santeri, and keen to hear the speakers and questions that might come. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you, Maria. So to kick us off, we talk about Fossil to Clean. Fossil to Clean is a multi-year campaign run by us at Women Business Coalition and our core partners. It was launched in 2023 in the run-up to COP28 in Dubai, calling for policymakers to take a stand on shifting from fossil fuels to clean solutions. So far, the focus of the campaign has been on policy advocacy, getting the right policy landscape in place that enables this transition, and for you as companies to take action. However, we've also heard from companies that support on action is also needed. So what we did was we convened a task force of companies to help us understand and develop these checklists and to ensure that they are relevant for businesses. So a huge thank you to all of the task force representatives who contributed their time and expertise. We had a series of workshops where these companies shared relevant questions and their experiences. Not to forget the network of our core partners displayed here on the right, whose contribution has also been paramount for the development of the checklists. Lastly, we'd also like to extend our thanks to the organizations who contributed by reviewing the contents of the guidance, a very valuable second or third opinion. The list is displayed here at the bottom of the slide. So based on these various inputs, we've developed the guidance document. The document is focused on near-term action, so the next 5 years, and it focused on companies' own sphere of influence. So mostly own operations with some actions where value chain action can have direct impacts. The sections include energy efficiency in buildings, electricity procurement, business travel, and fleet management. However, we're already looking into expanding this to areas such as process heat and logistics at large. So far, we wanted to keep this fairly manageable at 87 pages in PowerPoint slide format, but as said, we're looking to expand going forward to become even relevant for more and more companies. So for the business user, the individual, we have wanted to provide a pathway that shapes up like a decision tree or a flow chart, if you will. Some things you might have already done, others not yet. So you can always sort of skip steps and that you've already taken action on. For example, in this example where we're talking about energy efficiency in buildings, you would start with assessing whether you are occupying an owned or leased building or space. And then you would go through the steps all the way to taking action and then monitoring progress. So as you see, this assessment should be done for each space that you occupy. Hence, there are rather sort of location specific rather than for an entire company. So you'd need to do this for every building, every region you operate in. So for most of the steps, there are also deep dive slides that you can click through to get more information. So behind each step, a deep dive slide you can navigate to, and these include the sort of detailed action checklists, such as to understand your energy consumption, check your electricity and/or gas meter, analyze how your energy consumption is distributed across different lines of, across different times of day to identify consumption peaks, etc., etc. And these actions are also supported by related materials. So they also signpost to other resources where you can find even more detailed information. And also, we wanted to provide you with real-life case examples of investments for inspiration. So there are, for example, case example by Roche Diagnostics on a CO2-free site expansion in New Jersey, as well as a case by Kronospan and Signify on energy efficiency gains through lighting solutions. So do check out these when you get to the guidance document. And yeah, by the way, we're always on the lookout for more case examples. So let us know if there are any that you would like to share with us. We'd be very happy to hear more from you. In addition to the case examples and the more detailed ones, we also have every project manager's most loved or hated tool, an Excel sheet that you can tailor to your needs or transfer to a more sophisticated project management tool, if you will. So this lists all of the 120 actions. And although that sounds like a lot, fear not, some of these are very basic, and I'm sure that every single company here will have taken at least some of them. So yeah, with that, I hope that as many of you as possible will be able to download the tool after this webinar on our website and that you find it useful. Please share it with your colleagues, your suppliers, friends, even family if relevant. This has been made freely accessible for a reason. So we want as many of you to be able to use these as possible. And as said, we look to expand this with new thematic areas. So you can sign up for updates when you download it on our website. So you'll be up to date on when we will be adding additional guidance in the document. And yeah, as said, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them via the Q&A function. Questions can also be asked anonymously, both on the guidance document and for our panelists today. So with that, let's move on to our panel discussion. Over to you, Molly.
Thanks, Andre, and thanks for such an excellent overview of the checklist. I think that's only a part of the detail, but it really is quite extraordinary bringing together the different facets. And just hi to everyone. It's really great to see so many familiar faces, but also to see so many new faces. Just to introduce myself, so my name is Molly Walton. I'm the Director for Energy here with the We Mean Business Coalition, and in this capacity, I lead our energy transition work, which covers our sector-specific decarbonization, and I also lead our Fossil to Clean campaign. Maybe just to give a bit of additional context before we jump right into the panel. As Andre noted, throughout the development of this guidance, we worked with numerous businesses and partners to put this together, making sure that we were pulling and capturing the most practical actions that businesses could take and making sure that it was clear the steps and the sequence of some of those. And part of the reason that we did this, because I think it's very important to ground that, is what we heard from companies, right? Suntory mentioned that there was a need for, a desire to understand, well, what can I be doing? What actions can I be taking? And I think, there's ample guidance out there, right? I think we can all recognize that, especially on how to set targets and how to make, set ambitious targets. There's lots of very detailed sector-specific or technology-specific guidance. But what we felt was missing and was confirmed through conversations with companies across sectors was that there was, what was missing is what can I do now, right? What are the practical actions that I can take as a company right now over the next 2 to 5 years with the technologies that are available to really start that shift from fossil to clean? And importantly, how do I talk about that in terms of a holistic way, right? That's why we wanted to bring together the parts across electricity procurement, buildings, energy efficiency, fleet management, right? These are pieces that you all are doing. So how do we talk about that in a holistic way? And so I'm really pleased to have the business leaders on the screen here today to join us for the launch of the checklist and share their experiences. I think this is going to be a panel which takes those checklists and shows what it means to actually do them, some of the practical examples that we talked about. So very much looking forward to that. So I do want to introduce everyone on the screen. So if I'm going to say, introduce your name and title, and then if you could just give the folks on the call a few words about your role, that would be fantastic. So I'm going to start with Baran van Bergen. He's the Chief Sustainability Officer at Roche. Would you like to say a few words, please?
Yes, and hi everyone. Thanks, Molly. Thank you for having me, and congratulations with the launch of the Business Action Checklist. As you say, really important to become concrete. So I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer here at Roche, 1 year in, and responsible for setting our global strategy and helping to drive the strategy into our business.
Amazing. We're so glad to have you and for Roche's support throughout this work. Next, we have Megan Horvath. She's the External Communications Manager and leader on thought leadership from Signify.
Excellent. Thank you for having me for this panel. Very important topic to cover today. Yes, I'm at Signify, which is the world leader in lighting. There I'm focused on identifying storytelling opportunities within the business that really establish our position as the world leader in lighting. So I work very closely with our sustainability and public and government affairs colleagues, specifically focused on climate action, energy efficiency, and based in Amsterdam.
And last but not least, we have Simon Hensel-Thomas. He's the Director of Climate and Nature at Inca IKEA. Simon.
Thanks, Molly. Yeah, great to be here. And I'm leading the climate and the nature team at Inca Group. If you go into an IKEA store, 9 out of 10 of them are run by Inca Group, so we're the largest franchisee. Great to be here and looking forward to a good discussion. Over to you, Molly.
Fantastic. It's so great to have all these leaders here together. So maybe why don't we dig right in? As Santri mentioned, a key part of the checklist, right, is to showcase case examples from companies, both to sort of inspire, but also to provide sort of the tangible learnings and show how the actions of the checklist can be implemented, and importantly, the benefits of doing so. And so I'd really like to hear from each of you if you could share one concrete action that your company has taken to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels in your own operations and the impact that that has had so far. Maybe why don't we start with Simon? Sure.
Great. Maybe just to paint a very quick picture of the IKEA footprint, the climate footprint. So 50% of the footprint for IKEA sits in the materials that we use in our products. 98% sits in scope 3, and the rest of it is that 2% bubble. But it's still a really important 2% because we have operational control over that, and because many of those units are branded. So, you know, IKEA stores and units, it's the face of the brand, and it's what gives us the validation to then communicate across to our scope 3 partners. We have a target there to reduce emissions by 85% by 2030, our SBTi approved goals. I guess some highlights: we've managed to reduce scope 1 and 2 by around 60% since the baseline. A lot of that is through renewable electricity procurement, which is now at 97%. So the 2 remaining countries, and we'll get to that later, I guess, in challenges, are South Korea and India, where we have some challenges to move to renewable electricity there, but we're at 97% globally, largely through market-based instruments, which we'll get to later. And around 1 million solar panels on the roofs of IKEA stores around the world. So I think my highlight, if we just want one example, Molly, is there's a store in China, in Tianjin, and it's the only store in the IKEA universe to actually be able to generate 100% of their electricity from solar panels. So it's a particularly interesting example. Lots of challenges around renewable heating and cooling. So this is like the big driver for us to reduce to that 85. We'll basically be fitting heat pumps in our stores. And there are some quite challenging areas there around making the business case for that, and also waiting to the end of life for those units or going earlier. So we'll get to that in a second. Molly, I was allowed 2 examples. So the second one is actually suppliers. I just thought I'd bring that in, just moving into the scope 3. So Inter IKEA runs the supply chain for IKEA. They've done an amazing job with suppliers, and actually this year 93 additional factories moved to 100% renewable electricity. So the total is now 491, which is around 44% of our direct supply base, and that's had a massive impact on our overall CO2 emission reduction and footprint. But they've done a really good program with suppliers where we're partnering up with them and working very closely on moving to renewable electricity. Amazing.
Thanks, Simon. And I'm glad you pushed for 2 because it's important. I think that supplier piece is very important, right? In terms of this is looking at sort of own operations, but I think it really can be a tool for corporates to use to help with their supply chains. And so I'm glad you brought that up. Thanks. Didn't even have to plant that. Fantastic. Megan, would love to hear from Signify. Same question.
Yes, certainly. I'll start mine with a number. So 3.4%, that's the expected annual rise in global electricity demand in the coming years, according to IEA. So this is going to put a serious strain on our energy systems unless we really act today. But not doom and gloom. There's really, the good news is we have solutions. And really a lot of the technology exists today to kind of reverse this and make sure we're not bringing that number up too high. Now it's really about kind of awareness, which is great that we have this panel today to kind of discuss together, and also about adoption. So on the Signify side, and for those not so familiar, we're the former Philips Lighting. So we split as a standalone company in 2018. And we're really convinced that one of the most overlooked ways to decrease our energy consumption is through energy efficiency from lighting. So from 2022, lighting accounted for 2% of global emissions, which 2% might not sound that high, but it actually is equivalent to the impact of the aviation industry as a whole. So there's a lot we can do to kind of course correct that. And I think it's essentially through energy efficient LEDs. So we've been a big part of making that transition happen. In 2006, we actually called on governments globally to kind of lead the global phase out of incandescent lighting. At the time, it accounted for 2/3 of our sales volume. So this was something that, as you can imagine, really challenged people within the company, also customers, also the industry. But we're really proud today. We just recently reported on it in our annual report. 90% of our revenues are now from energy efficient LEDs. So it really shows the power of combining sustainability with innovation. I think they don't have to be at odds. It can be really combined. And just to show a couple stats of kind of the impact of this. So we said the 2% number, we can cut that in half if we make a couple swaps, which starts in homes, it starts in businesses, it starts in cities around the world. So we can reduce this to essentially half, so 1%. And this would free up enough electricity to charge every electric vehicle on the road today, as well as power 100 million heat pumps. And then I think an interesting aspect is to talk about the financial component. So of course, this is resulting in electricity savings, but it's also resulting in cost savings. So this is going to lead to 600 billion euro in electricity cost savings. So I think that's an important piece of the climate action conversation is, of course, people should be focused on the people and planet impact, but we also want to hear about the business value many times. And I think it's quite compelling that making this simple switch can essentially lead to such savings.
Great point. I'm so glad, Megan, that you brought up energy efficiency. It really is sort of the unsung hero and just looking at the impacts that we can have and the savings that come from that. So great example. Last but not least, Brand, would be great to hear from Roche's perspective. What's something that Roche has done that's really driven impact in the shift away from fossil fuels?
Sure. And maybe a few words on Roche because we're less of a consumer brand, right? Like Signify and IKEA. So we are a healthcare company founded over 125 years ago in Basel. And we're one of the very few healthcare companies who both provide medicines. So in 2024, we treated 26 million of patients with our medicines, but we also have diagnostics. And last year we did 30 billion tests around the world. We work in over 100 countries with over 100,000 people. And we're a family-controlled company with a long-standing commitment to sustainability. And so this has been one of the core values of our founding families as well. So we've done a lot of work over the last decades on Scope 1 and 2. So since 2004, baseline 2004, we basically reduced Scope 1 and 2 emissions with 69%. And in that trajectory, obviously, we took a lot of measures. And as you would expect, we also focus on our Scope 3 emissions. 90% of emissions sit, upstream, downstream. Healthcare companies collectively account for 5% of global emissions, twice the aviation. It's not a competition, but healthcare has a huge impact. So that's why we're working a lot on this. I would say a highlight is for us, yes, we've done a lot, obviously, around all these areas that you mentioned, in the business checklist. I would say one of the highlights is sustainable electricity. So by the end of this year, we will have 100% sustainable electricity around the world. We're currently at 86%. And that took, quite obviously some efforts, as you can imagine, in our global site network. So I would say this is one of many actions and levers that we've pulled, and we're actively working on in-grid solutions. Also, we have some challenges in some countries, but we are quite determined that we have 100% of sustainable electricity by the end of this year.
It's a great example, and I think this leads really well into our next question. So part of the reason we focused, we wanted to focus the checklist on practical actions that companies can take today, right? We've highlighted several of those. We've highlighted energy efficiency. We've highlighted, the shift to renewable procurement, on-site renewables. But I'm keen, and I feel like within that, there's often solutions or actions that are overlooked. Megan, you already mentioned one of them, energy efficiency. I think that's probably the most overlooked solution from a personal perspective. We can argue about that later, but so I would love to hear from each of you, for companies who are really starting out, because the intent of this checklist is to showcase examples of the leaders. Leaders maybe have already done several pieces on this checklist, but it's also to help those who are just getting started, those who maybe just set a target and want to know, how the heck do I achieve this? What would you say to those companies who are just starting? Sort of what is one of those overlooked actions that they really should consider when they're starting their journey from shifting away from fossil fuels to clean electricity? Again, we've mentioned a couple of them, but would love to hear if there's any others. Megan, can I start with you?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, but even regardless of the size of the company, it's important to look at your own operations. So plenty of research shows that a lot of companies or companies overall can account for half of global emissions. So I think just turning inward and kind of realizing what impact you might have within your own operations. And procuring electricity from renewables is really one of the smartest ways that they can kind of shift away from this reliance on fossil fuels. So this is everything from kind of your buildings to transport, just considering some alternatives. This is often even more cost effective to switch into this renewable category in some markets. And I think that trend is continuing. So that's very encouraging and positive. And I think the impact is clear. So one thing that was present in the We Mean Business Coalition checklist is that the majority of customers are more likely to buy from companies that are investing in clean energy. So I think in terms of business impact and kind of the financial side, it is even beneficial to make this transition and just start somewhere. So what we're doing actually at Signify, two of the ways that we're kind of reducing our reliance on fossil fuels and taking quick action is through power purchase agreements and virtual power purchase agreements to really accelerate this transition to renewable energy. So we currently have 3 in place in the US, Poland, and Finland. And today, I think 37% of our renewable electricity is from these power purchase agreements. We announced it, I think, in 2023 with Finland. So we have kind of agreement with a couple of other companies for the next 10 years. So with one of the largest operating wind farms in Finland. And I think it's a nice way to, first of all, give companies access to renewable electricity, but also while reducing emissions, but then also encourage kind of the transition of our grids to something that's more sustainable in terms of these forms of power. And some stats on what we're delivering. So this is enough electricity to power 40,000 households, quite substantial. And we're also avoiding 230,000 tons of CO2 emissions per year through this shift. So I think this power purchase agreement model does a good job of kind of providing income stability to these providers, while also guaranteeing that we get kind of this clean energy. And then a second example I'll give on this is also we launched our first electric truck for regional transport in the Netherlands. So our headquarters is in Eindhoven, so we did that there. And essentially this is providing kind of a sustainable transport option from our warehouses to our regional customers. And we're able to reduce emissions by around 50 tons per year. So this is something we're hoping to pilot or kick off in other countries as well, but it was very successful in the Netherlands.
Great examples. Thanks, Megan. Brenda, it'd be great to hear from you. What are some of the maybe overlooked actions that, 1 or 2 overlooked actions that a corporate can take when it's starting out? What advice would you give?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds obvious, and it probably is, but I would say data is quite important. Either small or big. So having the right data, which allows you to track progress, but also have decision useful information. I think that's super important, and that's a starting point. And really understanding where you can get the biggest bang for the buck, right? So there's a real difference, obviously, in some of these levers, and you have these so-called marginal abatement curves, where you can really try to minimize, the cost per ton of abated CO2. That's very simple tools, but I think that is very useful. Also, that allows us to optimize between sites, right? We have bigger sites, smaller sites. So bringing that rationale in is obviously very important, and you need data for that. And that a special category of data, I would say, is cost benefit, right? Again, the cost optimizing the costs with the MAC curves and tools. On the benefit side is also having a broad view on benefits, right? It's avoided cost. Imagine what our energy bill would be if we wouldn't have almost, nearly saved 70% of energy since 2004. So when you do an ROI, when your financial team does an ROI, it's also looking at, the avoided cost. It's looking at future cost, carbon pricing, energy efficiency schemes. And also it's looking, in our case, and sometimes it's hard to put a number on that, but we try, is also look at the potential commercial benefit. Our clients, for example, large hospitals really care about this. So there is this commercial upside. So I would say what is sometimes overlooked is doing that business case. This is not just a cost out, right? It's you need to look at it from a broader perspective and do a holistic business case. So it's data, and especially having a holistic view on the cost and benefits, I would say.
Those are great examples, and I love that you raised sort of the thinking about it beyond just emissions, thinking what are some of the broader benefits. That conversation I think is really important, and looking at that, and data is always essential. That's how you're going to be able to benchmark and understand if the actions you're taking are actually bearing fruit, being able to have some of that data. So really great points. Simon, would also love to hear from you in terms of what are some actions that are no-brainers that you would advise corporates to take.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. Yeah, difficult to go last on this one because I'm just thinking +1 to Megan and Barend for everything you just said. I mean, the energy efficiency one, definitely Megan +1. So for us, we managed to improve energy efficiency by around 20% since 2016. And we always say the most sustainable form of energy is the energy that we don't use. And it's so IKEA because we're a low-cost company. We want to pass on low prices to our customers so they can afford nice products. And therefore, energy efficiency is just a really good one. We actually ran an Energy Efficiency World Cup across our teams, which was also really motivating. I won't tell you which country won, but they found it a really good staff engagement tool as well to get involved in, almost gamify energy efficiency. So that is definitely one. I think it's not so sexy, but it's got amazing potential. It's definitely low-hanging fruit, I would say. Then another one just to add, I think, is on-site generation. So at the moment for IKEA, that's only around 8% of our renewable electricity is on-site generated. We're relying on market-based instruments and PPAs, Megan, like you said. And I was just looking at the SBTi standard, Maria, which is out now for consultation. And there you can see a push more away from market-based instruments towards on-site generation. So I think it's quite interesting if you're starting now, if you could choose between buying a REC certificate or you could choose to fit a solar panel to your roof, which would have the cost benefit, Barend, to your point, and which would actually be a better investment now. I think with the standards changing, I think the intention is to push companies rightfully more towards on-site generation, which I think I would welcome. I think the other thing is a move towards 24/7 matching on renewable electricity. We're just kind of starting that journey in IKEA, but I think that will be huge in the future. And you can see Google and Microsoft, for example, who are already leading on that, where you're matching your consumption and your production live. So you move towards more of a location specific. I think that will be big in the future as well. And I think at the moment, not many people are onto that. The last one was construction emissions. I think this is, again, sorry, Molly, it's moving into scope 3 again, but it is still your buildings. And for IKEA, it's concrete and steel. And that's a huge footprint, actually, is the buildings and the stores that we build. So one example there, we've developed some sustainable construction principles to guide future buildings in IKEA, which will be looking at alternatives like green steel and lower emission concrete. So I think probably harder to get to that one, but still very important.
Yeah, I think you raised a lot of good sort of where are some of the trends going, right? In terms of 24/7, in terms of what, looking ahead, how should corporates be thinking? I think on the procurement piece, it's an interesting, how do you kind of on-ramp to that 24/7 is where a lot of companies are moving, but for some it won't be viable. And so how do you move corporates along sort of that procurement pathway? And importantly, how do you make sure that the market structures and the policy structures are in place to support some of that? All of those pieces are, I think, very important when thinking about actions and what do companies need to choose to do and what can they do. super fascinating conversation. We've got about 10 minutes left, but I do want to ask each of you, excuse me, a very specific question, if you don't mind, moderator prerogative. So Baran, can I start with you? Obviously, Roche has been a super great supporter of this work since the start, engaging on the task force, acting as a sounding board. It would be great just to hear from your perspective, from Roche's perspective, why you were so keen to engage in this work and the value that you see in this type of guidance.
Sure. I mean, first of all, we are a healthcare company, right? So we provide medicines and diagnostics to patients, and we increasingly see that planetary health impacts human health, right? So those two worlds are coinciding. So this is a super relevant topic. Secondly, I would say innovation and collaboration are at the heart of our business model. More than 50% of our pharma, revenue comes from partner products, right? So we are used to innovating in a broader ecosystem, and we bring a lot of innovation into the company, into our ecosystem. And the same applies for sustainability, right? We have a pretty decent size, but we're very small in the grand scheme of things. So we want to collaborate. We need to collaborate, and we're used to doing that. So also on these topics, with our value chain. So we really like to co-develop also some of the new technologies. An example here in Basel is, we are co-developing high temperature heat pumps for process, for process purposes. They're not out there on the market. And our Basel site, our headquarters, they're so keen, so they are just going into actually co-developing high temperature heat pumps, because it's at the core of our business, innovation and collaboration. Then we also like to raise the bar, right? We do that, for example, to the Sustainable Market Initiative, which, as some of you know, one of the 22 industry task force is around health systems. And together with 7 other big biopharma companies, we want to raise the bar, right? And we see this as part of it. Let's work together and really raise the bar. And lastly, if you may have noticed during the last couple of months, our people, they're really passionate about it. And I'm glad this came through. So our team, was quite keen to work together. We've, again, done a lot over the last years and decades, and we're very happy to share that, with others. So our team is very passionate about this topic, and that's why we think, this is an important project.
That's great, and I couldn't agree with you more in terms of that co-development, co-learning. How can we help each other accelerate action and make sure the market is set for doing that? So some really great examples. I want to talk to you further around the work you're doing on heat, but that's for another time. Megan, I want to ask you a question. So one of the things that we heard from businesses as we were developing this guidance is the importance of having a climate transition action plan. Some people call it climate transition plan, a few different words for it. But importantly, one that's forward-looking and outlines how companies are moving from setting those targets and ambition to sort of taking action to achieve those goals. And we really worked to develop the checklist with that in mind, right? To be complementary and to support the development of these transition plans. And I know that Signify has had a climate transition action plan in place for a while. And so I would just be keen to hear from you, if you could elaborate sort of the actions that you're taking as part of that plan and how they may be reflected as part of the checklist.
Certainly. Thanks, Molly. Yes, so Signify announced its climate transition plan late last year, which, as you said, outlines our commitment to achieve a 90% reduction in GHGs across the whole value chain compared to 2019. And we aim to achieve this by 2040. So this essentially impacts, of course, our own operations, but also our supply chain. And it's actually inspired by the 4 A's framework from We Mean Business Coalition. So hat nod to that, which is the ambition, action, advocacy, and accountability. So I feel it's really important to have kind of a compass. As they say, what gets measured gets managed. So I think having this plan really helps us kind of have a clear path of what needs to be done. And we're regularly tracking progress on these commitments. So I think 2040 is a ways away, 15 years. So it's good that we can regularly kind of report back of how things are going. And we recently disclosed in our annual report how things are tracking. But since 2019, we've already reduced our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions by half. And this has mostly been through increasing the energy efficiency of our products, going back to energy efficiency, and then, of course, reducing our energy use at our factories and offices. But really, most of our emissions we found through this work, they lie outside of our operations. Actually, 99% are in the use phase of our products, which is, of course, when the lighting products are in use. So when you switch on the light switch. So really, what we're trying to do is combine sustainability goals with innovation. I think they can go hand in hand of how can we make better products that are more energy efficient while also hitting these sustainability targets. And one of the examples I'll call out actually was in the business action checklist. So that's Chronospan in Germany. This really shows it in action. So the company wanted to, it's a German manufacturer, they wanted to reduce energy consumption at its production site. And we replaced their gas discharge lamps with LED kind of high bay luminaries. Which also had sensors, so you can do dimming controls, you can do motion detection, so it's definitely more efficient in that sense. And they were able to reduce electricity consumption by 75%, and also save 1.2 million euro over the course of the next 10 years. So this was a target that they had as part of their own kind of climate transition plans, was to reduce costs as well. And I think this is quite a substantial portion of what their target was just from lighting. So another thing interesting from this project is that the whole solution was installed in one day. So I think we haven't gotten into it too much, but on the building renovation side, lighting is really one of the most overlooked methods of kind of renovating. One of the least invasive projects instead of kind of, revamping the heating and cooling installation. And it can be one of the most cost effective. So I think I talked about renewables a little bit, but going back to the energy efficiency impact, I think that should really be kind of the first fuel in any climate efforts.
Really helpful. And again, great to hear sort of the points and energy efficiency. It keeps coming out, which I think is really critical. Simon, I want to turn to you now, if you don't mind. IKEA has been incredibly active in its journey to transition away from fossil fuels to clean solutions. And I know you've touched on a few of them already, but I would be keen to hear more and learn more from IKEA's experience in terms of those low-hanging fruits across your core operations that you felt have really moved the dial in terms of making that shift from fossil to clean. You've mentioned a couple of them, but I'm sure there's others, and it would be great to hear about those.
Absolutely, Molly. Yeah, so I think the main levers, and we've spoken a bit, renewable electricity sourcing, renewable heating and cooling, so installing heat pumps across our estate, energy efficiency. We're also looking at sustainable refrigerants, which is another topic, because as you move, towards more refrigerant type solutions, you need more efficient and sustainable gases, and also reducing and recycling waste is also quite big. I think they're the main. So in our transition plan, Megan, we've highlighted those as the areas where I think we've made the most progress. But we still, to your point, Baron, the marginal abatement curve, some of that's been easier, but we're finding now it's getting tougher. Like the last, we've reduced by 30% since our baseline, and we've got another 20% to go in 4 or 5 years. And now we're beginning to see that is harder and it's more expensive. So I think that still we'll pull on those levers, but it might just get a bit tougher to do that at the speed and to get the emission reductions that we have so far. One area that we haven't spoken about is transport, which is in the checklist. So for you, Molly, I'm going to mention that one. So for deliveries, for home deliveries, we're now at around 40% of our retail home deliveries being made by zero emission vehicles. And that's around 6.3 million deliveries a year. So it's quite been a real effort by the team. We're still way short of goal, which is actually 90 to 100, but it's been a colossal effort, and they doubled the share this year actually to electric vehicles. Challenges there are in grid infrastructure, charging infrastructure, sorry, also long distances, where you've got long distances and sometimes the vehicles aren't suitable, but also just the availability of vehicles in the last few years has been, and the cost has been quite poor. So it's meant the goal's been a bit slower than we would have liked, but we're still still kind of making good progress. And in 20 cities now, we're delivering by electric vehicles 100%, and it's 2,500 plus electric vehicles. So I think that's an area that's often forgotten, but is an important part of your own operations footprint. And of course, with delivery in cities, you're talking about clean air as well, so it impacts people's lungs directly in city landscapes. And a really interesting story is that in Paris, we're delivering by barge, by electric barge along the Seine. And during the Olympics, many delivery companies couldn't get into the center of Paris, but the electric barge could. So it was quite a nice business case example where clean energy equals accessibility for our customers.
I love that example. What a good example to end on. And thank you for bringing up transport. It is a very important part that we hadn't gotten to yet. So I'm really glad you unpacked that. I do want to turn to questions, but first I just want to say to the panel, thank you so much for your experiences, for sharing your experiences. I think it really took the action checklist and shows that near-term action is not only feasible, but it's also good for business, right? I think that message is really important to get out. I think it also underscores and ties into what Maria said at the beginning, in that clean energy momentum is unstoppable. You know, you just mentioned, Simon, that there are some challenges, right? That action is not in a vacuum, importance of policy and some of these other pieces. But I think really to kind of give that confidence to those who are starting out that the technologies are there, actions are feasible, the importance of getting started and engaging in community to get started. And so hopefully the checklist will help to that end. I'm seeing a couple of questions come in. So maybe just one to any panelist who wants to answer. We get touched on this a little bit, but I think, you know, the importance of recognizing that you have your own operations, but as we talked about, a lot of your emissions sit outside that. But how are you helping companies, how are you helping your suppliers take near-term action? What are some of the pieces? Are you looking at similar actions that you're taking yourselves? Is there something different? How are you engaging your suppliers? I don't know who wants to take a crack at that question.
I can start if you like, Molly.
That'd be
yeah,
great.
you mentioned, I mean, Inter-IKEA runs the product supply chain for Inca Group, but I mentioned the renewable electricity progress they've made there, which has been fantastic. We're also looking at the indirect procurement, which Inca manages. So if we're buying concrete and steel for our stores, for example, we're trying to incentivize our indirect supply chain to sign up to SBTi and to set SBTi approved goals. I'll be honest, it's been tricky because some of the suppliers we haven't got a super strategic relationship with, and the barrier to entry has been quite large to set an SBTi goal, but we're still working on that and we're still pushing them towards that. And then one example, I mentioned green steel before. We've managed to work with our suppliers there to 50% of our racking. You know, when you go into an IKEA store at the end, you see those big steel racks with all the products on there in the warehouse, 50% of that is going to come from green steel in the next few years. So we work directly with one supplier to make that one happen. So instead of waiting for the data and waiting for management approach, we actually went straight to a solution that we know would have a big carbon impact, which is steel, which is a huge CO2 footprint.
Super helpful. Anyone else want to take a crack at that one? If not,
I'm happy.
Brent, yeah, go ahead.
I think it really depends, obviously, on the category. So, you know, also we do quite a bit of construction, you know, in the sites, manufacturing, logistics. And there, you know, our experts work together, try to work together, you know, with our suppliers. We have a sustainable construction framework where we looked at embodied carbon, but also the overall, you know, site setup. So that's, for example, for all the CapEx projects we do around infrastructure and sites. We have 60,000 suppliers, so you have to really segment them. But there's a lot of collaboration also in our bill of material suppliers, right? The direct materials where we really try to collaborate and see how, I mean, sometimes it's hard because it's a highly regulated industry, but how we can change, you know, certain processes or, you know, certain materials. And then lastly, also for us, supplier engagement is super important. So we want to get to 70% of our suppliers by emissions, also signing up to science-based targets. We are a very science-led company. We like data, right? So we really appreciate if our suppliers also sign up to the SBTi commitments. And we're already quite far with that, and we're going to 70% of our suppliers by emissions. And that will require a lot of collaboration, right? And some need, maybe a bit of guidance, the business action checklist. With others, it's much more of a longer term discussion on how you can sort of move away from certain processes or materials. But yeah, a lot of work, because we really heavily sort of rely on our suppliers, for our products. So a lot going on there.
Great. Yeah, a great example in terms of how to move some of that. Bren, there's a question for you here around renewable electricity, right? You mentioned some of the challenges in accessing renewable electricity supply in some countries. And so the question just wants to know how you're overcoming some of this. Are you looking to purchase unbundled certificates? What are you doing to address some of these challenges? What's the reality of that?
Yeah, no, good question. I mean, in some countries, there's just no, technically it's not possible. There's no in-grid solutions. And I mentioned the Sustainable Market Initiative. Sometimes we team up, right, with our peers and try to do something bigger. For example, in China, we did that. So we sort of work together, and that allows, to get to bigger scale. And we were able, through the collaboration in the sector, to do some PPAs there. In some markets, we're trying to do VPPA, right? So also there, that can help. And then for those where it's really impossible in the short run, ultimately we want to get to 100%, right? Sustainable electricity with as least as possible market-based instruments. But in some cases, we still sort of look for high quality RECs or EACs. But the preference is really to have in-grid solutions and even on-site. So yeah, our country teams and our kind of utility organizations and engineers are really going sort of local by local. But we're almost there, but a few countries, I think, need a bit of a push and in-grid solutions.
It's a great
Definitely agree
with
with
strategy.
Berend. Oh, sorry, Molly.
No, go
I'm gonna say
please,
I
Megan.
definitely agree with Berend on that point, and it's one of the interesting things that I think about is larger companies have a really big impact in terms of all the suppliers they work with. So Signify is 30,000 employees, present in 70 countries. So I think by these larger companies investing in these kind of solutions with PPAs, we can make the market kind of move that way, so that companies who are a little bit more kind of junior in their journey, they can eventually kind of start using these solutions. So I think it's positive.
A great point on the sort of importance of demand and sending that demand signal to the market and how it can really pull others and bring supply to the market. So great points there. I want to end with one question. Simon, you actually had mentioned, right, bringing employees into the activities that you're doing sort of through the gamification competition between stores, gamification of energy efficiency. But I'd love to hear, right, actually companies are made of people, and we've been talking a lot about climate action impacts people. And so would love to know in terms of these actions that you're taking, how you're bringing your employees on board to help you achieve some of these. Simon, do you want to go first?
Do you want me to go first, Molly? Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, this is like number one, right? Because I think effectively we're talking about the biggest industrial transformation the world's ever seen for like hundreds of years. And we expect that to be done from within a sustainability team of like 20 people. It's never going to happen. You have to bring the whole organization with you. And it's not that no one, I mean, everyone in IKEA cares deeply about the planet. So everyone wants to do the right thing, but you have to kind of make that accessible. I think you have to make it simple. In IKEA, we're quite science-based, Baron. I think a bit like you said you are, and I'm sure you are as well, Megan. So being fact-based really helps, but you also need to make it real for someone in their job. Like, what does this actually mean for me? What can I actually do? Because I really care about climate, but what do I do? So we've done a number of things, actually. I think one of the things I'm most proud of was a leadership training course where we actually did 9 hours of content training with the senior leaders in IKEA. And we had externals come in, we had Johan Rockström, we had a lot of deep understanding of the topic. And I think that kind of lit a fuse in the leadership community that's been quite contagious, actually. And we're seeing a lot of actions being driven through that 9 hours of content. So I think spending time on the subject and the topic and going deep, I think is really important, and not just with the leadership community, but also we're looking at how we can roll that content out to all of our co-workers.
Amazing. Megan?
Yes, I would just say again, the energy savings through energy efficiency is super drastic. So that affects everything from your own operations to kind of the products you offer your customers. And then also the fact that sustainability doesn't need to come at the expense of innovation. I think it's something that should be considered even when you're developing your products. It can be quite intertwined. And that's the last, I think, is just make sure you're taking small steps, incremental steps, because if you're a smaller organization, it can feel very overwhelming to get started on some of this, but look for examples of success. And I think going back to what Baron said in the beginning on data, just start somewhere, and then each incremental improvement, I think, is going to feel great to make progress.
Great. Brent, can I get how's Roche bringing in folks that are working for you into the sustainability objectives?
Yeah, pretty big question, but I would say it's probably a sandwich, right? Where you do it's the tone of the top, the leadership, right? And setting out these big audacious goals. I think that's part of it, but also bottom up action, right? And we, for example, facilitate a lot of what we call sort of bottom up grassroots networks. People who really want to do this, especially because they're working in healthcare, right? They see the impact of climate change, right, on disease patterns, on human health. So there's not a lot of convincing to do, right? And nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. So people want to do this around the world, and if you have the guidance and the goals top down, and you facilitate, right, at a decentral level across the world the action, then you can really reduce a lot, as we again have shown over the last decade, 70%. And we still need to go much further. So, but I think this is energy efficiency, climate change is one of the easier topics. There's very little discussion. We're now really in the doing mode, right? Let's just do this. So I think it also unleashes a lot of energy, at least at Roche. And again, we'd like to collaborate with our suppliers and also our customers on this. So this is how we see it.
That's fantastic. Great answers to sort of, sadly, we have to close the panel conversation. I feel like we could keep talking for several hours, but I do just want to say a big thank you to the panelists for joining us, also for the great questions from the audience. Was a really good conversation. I think a really grounding conversation in terms of how businesses can take some of these actions, the feasibility of taking these actions, and don't wait, get started now. Don't let perfection be the enemy of progress and good. And so I think that was really helpful, just to take maybe what can be abstract and make it much more tangible. I do want to flag in wrap up, sort of the business action checklists are now available on our website. We should have a slide. You can see the information here. You will also receive a link via email after the webinar where you can peruse the guide. You can download it. As Santri said, there's a great Excel that you can download. We do hope that you make use of this, and not only for yourselves, but also to share that with other corporates, with some of your suppliers. Please do make good use of this. We're also very keen to hear from you because we're planning to host thematic webinars around one or more of the focus areas. So energy efficiency in buildings, electricity procurement, business travel, bringing in experts, bringing in companies to kind of unpack some of these topical areas, get into what can we do, what are some of the challenges, how do we overcome some of those pieces. We want to have some more robust conversations around each of the areas. So please do let us know your interest. I think a poll should be coming soon. So if you can click more than one option. Maybe you want to go to all of them, that would be great. But please do let us know if you would be interested in attending these webinars, because we can then send with you more information. You'll also be able to find out more information of the updates of the checklist. As Santri mentioned, this is the start, but we're also looking to add on additional modules. So please do make sure you sign up so you can continue to read, get the information. I want to close by just sort of thanking the brilliant We Mean Business team who's behind these checklists. So just to say, Santri, Emily, Ajay, and our comms colleagues, Kristen, Mary, and Susan, right? Tons of work to get these checklists together along with our partners in task force. Just wanted to say thank you for that. I think it's a great product, and I think we had a great conversation here today. With that, I'm going to close just to say, you know, we look forward to hearing your stories of action and how you're using these checklists. Please don't be shy. If you want to reach out to the team, there should be an email on the screen. Both share with us your stories of action, but also raise questions you have. Or, you know, if you want to chat about some of the actions on the checklist, please don't hesitate to reach out. But thank you to the panelists. Thank you to everyone who attended. We're looking forward to seeing all the action that comes in going fossil to clean. So thank you.
Thank you all.
you.